I am writing in Linda Roebuck's anthology and a new book.
Nice. All right, we are on. Good evening and welcome to Journeys with Judy. I'm Judy, your host, and tonight we are in Annapolis, Maryland to speak to Rosemary Bredesen, the scientific mystic. You're going to hear amazing things about Rosemary, so we will just start the interview now. Before I do, I'll get yelled at by Katie Anna if I don't remind you that I am an energy practitioner at Journeys Holistic Health and Wellness Center in York, PA, as well as Etheric Connections. If you would like to book energy healing sessions with me, Jen will put information in the contacts. Thank you. She's
Good.
like, you do that show for free. You got to plug yourself somehow.
Yeah, get the commercial in right away.
Okay. Thank you so much for having us in your beautiful home.
Oh, it's fun having you guys here.
It's been great. Pre-show conversations have been very, very interesting.
Well, hey, why not?
Exactly. So we're going to start nice and easy. Where were you born and raised?
Washington, D.C.
Really?
And my parents were born in Washington, D.C. Very unusual. 1908 and 1922. So I come from a line of Washingtonians.
You do? How was that? The hustle and bustle of Washington, D.C. that I see now, has it always been like that?
No, there's actually, it used to be a small town.
Okay.
And the feel, I'm really old, honey. I mean, like, we did have streetcars. But, I mean, cars. We didn't have horse and buggies.
There weren't horse and buggies.
No,
Come on.
no, not that old. But there was kind of a small town within the town because there were a lot of transients. And then there were the people that were there, you know, all, who had been born there, or people that my parents had gone to school with, kind of a thing. So I kind of ran into people. I went to high school at a small private Catholic girls' school, and one of my classmates' mother had gone to a different small Catholic girls' school with my mom. You know, it's things like that made it a small town. And Washington had a different feel then. The politics were different because people could be of a different political party, but everybody agreed on what the problems were. Okay. Their disagreements were about how to solve the problems, like, how do we fix this? I think it should be this way, I think it should be that way. And so that's where the conversations were. Okay. And now things seem to be more divided, like they can't agree on what the problems are. So how does the dialogue about solutions get started?
Exactly.
If you don't have that. So I've really seen it shift and change in that realm. But one of the things about growing up in Washington is you get away from celebrity fantasy stuff, right? Okay. So classmates who were children of a congressman, like a congressman's wife pierced my ears at her kitchen table with ice cube and needle, right?
Okay.
And I remember going to one of my school dances, and we had to introduce our dates to the chaperones. And there was this man, it's like, oh, I wonder who's dad. I know that face, but I can't remember what his name is. So I'm leaning in to read the name, and it was Harry Reasoner, who was a big-name TV newscaster. Like, oh, Mr. Reasoner. Right? And so you kind of, you know, like, my sister was in the year behind me, and the speaker at her graduation from that high school was Bobby Kennedy, because his special assistant had a daughter in the class. So these are the kinds of things that happen in DC that you kind of like, you don't get that mystique.
Yeah. Like, okay.
Right. So yeah, it was I think a different thing, and I also got used to going to the store and hearing all kinds of languages from people all over the world. My French teacher came out to the school from the embassy, so I learned French with a Parisian accent. You know, it wasn't like an American who learned French trying to teach me how to speak.
Oh, that's cool.
So those are the kinds of things that I think are, when you grow up in Washington, there's a cosmopolitan aspect to it, so you just take it for granted that everybody's kind of in the same soup.
Yeah, and that's not the way it is. No, that is not it at all.
No, I didn't realize what was outside of that realm.
Not until you get out, then you know.
Yes.
So, getting back to, they agreed on the problem, just not the solutions. Now, my question is, when they disagreed, did they still respect one another? And could they still remain friends?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because that's a huge shift.
It is. My parents were Republicans. Actually, My mother was a Democrat and a Catholic, and my father was a Protestant and a Republican. And when they got married, my dad converted to Catholicism and my mom became a Republican. So that was kind of their deal.
Okay.
But, you know, their friend, like, they had, one of their best friends was a special assistant to President Kennedy. And so we got invited to the White House for this little tiny Italian group Columbus Day celebration. So I got to meet President Kennedy because this, you know, Democrat was a friend of my Republican father's, you know, and that, so there was really friendship that didn't rely on a division like the politics part.
Okay, excellent. That's it's very interesting because we were talking before the show about the whole uproar in the United Methodist Church right now, and I was reading some comments on Facebook, and one of them was, it was a snippet about those that don't agree with us. Those that disagree with us, ... are enemies. Since when did people that disagree with you become your enemy? And that's immediately where I went. I was like, what? I don't understand.
It's not what Jesus taught.
No, it's not at all.
Or it's not in my Bible.
No, and I think that's where I struggle with my daughter, you know, being 14 and all of this impressions being put on her. Just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean that we're fighting, that we're enemies, that anything. People can respectfully disagree and still be friends.
And that's how we grow. We start to explore the other ideas.
And we see how other people live. You know, you were talking about growing up in the cosmopolitan, thinking everybody grew up that way. How did you learn differently? You experienced different people. You got outside of it.
Right.
And I think we're limiting and boxing ourselves in by declaring enemies instead of respecting, listening, and growing.
I don't know if I would even consider anybody my enemy.
No.
I think other people might consider themselves.
Right.
But it's like, I don't have any enemies. Why would I have an enemy? No. What good does that energy do for me in my life?
Exactly. How does that serve either one of us?
Right. And so, you know, the concept is kind of outside of my realm. Like,
yeah, that really shook me. I was like, that's very interesting. But, okay, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Do you have any siblings? You spoke about a sister.
I have a sister who is 9.5 months younger than I.
Ooh.
Yes, she was premature. She was supposed to be 10.5 months younger. And we have another sister who is 11 years younger than I.
11 years?
My mom had a lot of miscarriages. So we had my middle sister and I grew up as kind of twins because we looked alike, and they always dressed her in a pink dress and me in a blue dress so they could tell us apart. Now, here's the thing that, you know, much later in life I realized I had glasses when I was 18 months old. Like, couldn't they say the one with the glasses was me, and the one that didn't have the glasses was her? But no.
Oh, they always put you in blue.
Yeah, and I am now married to a man who doesn't like pink. I can't even wear pink now. It's like, you know, sometimes the universe has a great sense of humor.
Oh, absolutely.
So there are 3 of us girls, but the youngest one is, I mean, she's catching up to us now.
Right.
But she was kind of like this child. I left for college, and you know, she was first grade, and so it was kind of a baby doll, a live baby doll for us.
Right. Huh. Now, did they stay local?
Yes, until last year, my middle sister moved down to Florida.
Oh.
So and my little sister moved. We've lived in different places at different times, but we've all been anchored here in the DC area. Mm-hmm. And our mom passed away in January of 2000, and my little sister had just moved back to Annapolis, and we were moving to Colorado. And, you know, it was kind of like everybody was doing this thing, but we were here for a while together. Now my middle sister's down in Florida, but she's got kids here, so she's back a lot. My little sister got married last August, and I performed the ceremony, and it was a nice little ceremony in the Keys on the beach. And so
very nice.
All 3 of us were together, you know, in Florida for a while. So we're close.
Good. Excellent. Mm-hmm. Okay. How would you describe your childhood? We talked about it a little bit.
Fun. I had a great, you know, like a charmed childhood, and we actually lived mostly in Bethesda, so it's like just across the district line on the Maryland side, and I had this wonderful giant willow tree in the backyard, and I had friends, and of course, you know, I never was without somebody because I had this like almost twin.
Right.
all the time. So it's like I didn't. I was an only child for 9.5 months. I'm kind of like the oldest that didn't really get to
experience the oldest. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it was, it was fun, and I just remember it as being such a close family, like being in the car and singing. Daddy would sing harmony, and going to the grandma's house every weekend, and the Italian side, everybody had to be there every Sunday for dinner, and so all the cousins were around, and so it was kind of one of those things that's kind of idyllic when you think about it.
Yeah.
And I didn't really suffer.
You didn't suffer. That's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
That's a very good thing.
And you think everybody else is growing up the same way.
Exactly.
Again, right?
Yeah.
And the church, I think, we were Catholics, and so I think the church was like a center of social stuff and school. So a lot of the neighbors all had lots more kids, but there were frequently 2 sisters in the 2 grades that my sister and I were in. So we'd have a lot of mutual friends, and
That
was
sounds
all
great. Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty magical. And my uncle got transferred a lot around the country he was administrator at VA hospitals, and so every summer we would go and visit wherever that was. Yeah, so I got to see Providence and Boston and Buffalo, Cincinnati, different places. And my grandmother and aunt always wanted to be in Florida, and so we went down to Florida a lot. So I got to see like the whole East Coast and lots of other places, and so it was kind of one of those childhoods that
kind of dreamy.
Yeah.
What did your parents do?
Well, my mom had a degree in economics and had gone to graduate school in education. So she worked for the Census Bureau for a while, and then she became a teacher. My dad was a securities trader. He graduated from college in 29, went to work in the securities field, experienced 29. And so they both had been in Washington, but the Depression didn't really hit Washington the way it did other places. Because so many government employees were still working and had to keep the government going during all of that. So that's what Daddy did. He changed jobs at one point to another firm in Washington, but then the first one that he'd worked for got into trouble with the SEC, and part of their settlement was that they bring Ken Robertson back on as treasurer because he had such an honest reputation in the business and in the government that they said if he were there, they would trust that their recovery would be honest and
would be legit. Wow.
Yeah. So I remember that story. I was really proud of him for that. And my mom was a teacher, so she was there when we came home, or we had a lot of her time.
Very nice. What is one of your fondest childhood memories? Sounds like you have many.
Oh, gosh.
What stands out?
What stands out from my childhood? It's interesting. This is going to sound weird when you ask for fondest memory, but we had a fire.
Okay.
When I was a senior in high school, we had a fire, and it was the last day that we had to wear winter uniforms of my senior year in high school. And I had planned to burn this brown tweed, bolero jacket and gored skirt and brown tie Oxfords, right? I was going to burn them when I finished that day. And that was the only outfit I had left to wear in the world after the fire burned out this brick house.
Oh, jeez.
But I remember my parents saying, it's okay. It'll all work. Everything always comes out okay. And, I mean, the joke at the time, watching the house and the firemen and everything, because we all came home for it, the neighbors were bringing martinis to my dad and iced tea to my mom. And I remember my mom, how come nobody's bringing me a martini?
Exactly. Where's my martini?
Exactly. And some angel at church found a house around the corner to rent for us for 3 months while they rebuilt our house. And my parents were just like, see, if you just trust, it all works out. And the ladies of the church came and filled up the larder and the refrigerator, and they found pieces of furniture and stuff to put in it. And so I just remember that as this incredible lesson. As a matter of fact, in seminary, I had to do a sermon about, and I did it about that, and learning how to trust. And when you really do believe that there's something greater going on, even something like that doesn't throw you. And my parents were wonderful about that.
They set a beautiful example.
They really did. And so it became more of an adventure. We got to live in a different house for 3 months for the summer. And, you know, all of that was kind of that perspective thing. And I think that that was probably one of those times where it could have gone a different way and didn't.
Right.
Right? And and they didn't play victim, and they didn't, woe are we, and what are we going to do? And so here's the cool story. My sister and I had been saving stock certificates, because back in the day you got these really pretty certificates when you bought stock. They were colorful, they were cool, and we were going to paper our wall with these defunct companies. So when a company went defunct, in order to get rid of the paper, we would pay 25 cents or 50 cents or something, and Daddy could write it off, and he'd bring us home these papers. Well, he had taken the folder with him before we did the wall. He took it into the office, so it wasn't there when we had the fire. And he decided one day to go through it just to see if any of the companies, you know, if any of the papers were worth anything. One of them was worth $10,000 in 1966.
Oh.
Which was a lot of money, and it was just what they needed. The difference between the insurance
Wow.
and getting the house fixed.
No way.
And so their story, right, was see, everything works out.
Wow.
And they gave us each a little bit to go get some kind of a thing. But I mean, the miracle parts of this was kind of like, see, this is how it is. This is how it is. And when you live that way, you really do kind of get a sense of, oh, I guess that's how it is.
Wow. No wonder you see that as a gift, because to learn that as a senior in high school, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I have lots of fun memories, and, you know, I used to hang out inside the willow tree, and all of those fun things, those little things. But that's a big one that just had so much wrapped up with a bow.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. In all this wonderful, beautiful stuff, were there any challenges for you as a child?
Challenges? I wonder what the challenges would have been. Well, I do remember some of the jerky boys calling me Four Eyes because I had glasses, but, you know, they were jerky boys.
Right. So you were just able to brush that off?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And so one of my challenges was in 8th grade when Sister Mary Dorothea slapped me up against a wall because I got a problem wrong in math.
Oh my.
Yeah, at the board. And in front of the whole 8th grade, she said, God gave you a good brain. Everyone else in this class is allowed to make a mistake, but you're not.
Oh.
Yeah, it took a lot of therapy to get rid of that.
I was going to say, wow.
But, you know, in terms of a challenge, I felt like I had to perform.
Right.
A lot. So, you know, valedictorian or, you know, get 100% or something like that.
So, of course, that carried through your teenage years, feeling that pressure.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've done a lot of work around that, but I've also done a lot of work around a whole lot of other things from past life that show up, and, you know, I just bless her as a teacher because I learned a lot from her.
Right.
And I don't remember challenges like, well, I almost died from chickenpox. That was a challenge.
That's a challenge.
I know. I happen to have, when I was born, my thymus gland was enlarged, and in that time they didn't realize the thymus wasn't like the appendix, that the thymus gland actually had a purpose. It provides the immunity for childhood diseases. They know that now. But they had also discovered x-rays, which was just great, so we'll use x-rays to shrink it. But they kind of didn't know how to manage it, so they shriveled it.
Oh.
So I had like German measles and chickenpox kind of concurrently.
Oh.
And, you know, I remember that I almost died, and it was quite an experience. But I had a near-death experience. My mom was at church praying to Mother Mary, and Mother Mary appeared to her and said I would be okay. And later on, doing family systems therapy or something, I realized that I had made a commitment to do Mother Mary's work. And so it was a challenge at the time, because my sister's in the bed with me and we could count her dots, and I had it internally and externally and couldn't walk and everything. So coming out of that and looking back on that, it was like, that was a decision point.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And how old were you?
6.
6?
Wow. And I remember thinking that my parents would be embarrassed to say our daughter died of chickenpox.
I can't die. The parents will be embarrassed. They will be so embarrassed.
I do remember, doctors from DC came out, they declared it the worst case they'd ever seen in DC and blah, blah, blah. They didn't put me in the hospital because they said, yeah, she's too far gone.
Oh my gosh.
But, chickenpox was bad.
Yeah.
But, again, I now see how it was part of my destiny. It was part of my contract with Mother Mary, and she came to me when I was in seminary, and I gave messages from her for a long time.
And how old were you when you realized this whole connection?
Oh, I was in 40s.
Okay.
All right. Oh yeah.
All right. So we'll get there.
Yeah.
Okay. So you finish high school and you go where?
Oh, there's a story about that.
See?
I went to Seton Hill College. It's now Seton Hill University in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, and I wanted to be a nuclear physicist and work on the space program. And my parents said, "You're going to go to school where you get the biggest scholarship."
Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty.
And Seton Hill, and at that time people didn't pick schools for their majors.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of picked the school. And so I went to Seton Hill, but they didn't have a physics major, and I thought, well, I'll do chemistry, and I did voice for a semester, and then it was kind of like, oh, I think I'll do math, because I'm getting A's in calculus, and it doesn't have any labs.
Okay.
My roommate was a home ec major, a dietetics major, and she was in labs all the time. So I majored in math.
Because there weren't any labs.
Yep. And I loved it. I've made really good friends, and it was wonderful. It was a great experience. I was glad I'd gone to a women's college.
Mm-hmm.
I'd gone to a women's high school, a women's college, and there's just something so freeing about that and that focus. And so I had this master plan about getting a math degree. Later I'll go back and get a master's. Someday I'll teach. So I had this whole track in mind. But shifted.
Okay. Okay, so you graduated with your math degree. Then what happened?
I was going to take the summer off because my parents had just moved to Annapolis, and we had a house on the water and a nice beach.
Very nice.
And I got a job right afterwards. I was like, darn it! Right. And so I started working as a computer programmer and analyst, and which is what math majors did then. They didn't even have computer majors per se at that time. And I stayed in the technical field. I stayed in that job for the Department of Defense for 14 years. I actually, advanced to be a program manager, project manager, and then managed a section of software developers. And then I went to work on the Hubble Space Telescope for NASA.
Oh, that's cool.
So, I was 35 and finally working on the space program.
You did it.
I did it.
You did it.
I achieved. And I had made that commitment to myself when I was like, 6 or 7. I remember standing outside with my dad and watching satellites like Sputnik and Echo go across the sky. And I remember saying, someday I'm going to work on that space program. And so it took a long 30 years, and it didn't turn out the way I'm going to be a nuclear physicist and work on the space program.
But you got there.
But I got there.
Got there.
And it was really great. I spent 12 years working for NASA on the Hubble. And that was really an exciting and glamorous thing to do that. Meet the astronauts. People like Tom Clancy would come to check out the Operations Center for one of his novels, and senators and congresspeople. And at the end, I was in charge of the Office of Public Outreach, so I kind of created that after launch, and that was about getting the pictures out and getting the stories out. And so we had the photo lab and the press group and the education group. And I felt a calling. I heard a voice saying, become a spiritual healer. And I said, you want what?
Who's he? What's it?
Hello. I am here on the Hubble, and I'm having dinner with the astronauts tomorrow night, and got this press conference with people from all over the world. And at that press conference, when the comet hit Jupiter, I had all this going on, and I felt, oh, we've got all the auditoriums full of people. We've got downstairs, we can look on the computers and see what's going on. And I've got all this to deal with. And I went outside. I walked through all those satellite trucks, with the lights and the different language being spoken into the microphones of the press people. And I went over to the parking lot and I looked up at Jupiter. And I thought, there's nothing between me and Jupiter now. Mm-hmm. This is how you're supposed to experience things. It's not about on the computer what the picture looks like or what the stories are. And I kept hearing the voice, become a spiritual healer. My reaction was, I didn't know if that meant go around saying, be healed, or what is that? So it took months, but I had decided, okay, I'm going to do stuff that's helping me. I had fibromyalgia, and I was studying NLP and hypnosis because that was helping.
What's NLP?
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Okay.
So a counseling tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, maybe someday I'll help people, on the side. And one week, two different people independently of each other said, you should meet this minister. She went to this seminary in Oklahoma, and you should talk to her. And I thought, oh, that's the same person. This is kind of like, you're getting good. I need a little more. So I met with this woman. I had coffee with her, and she said, if you're interested in this program, the dean of the seminary comes to Maryland once a year, and she's coming next week. You could talk with her and have your interview. And I'm thinking, this is good. So I met with her, and I signed up, right? And I remember my NLP trainers, when I told them the story, and he said, well, did you do all this research on all the other seminaries that are out there and all the other programs? And I said, no. I didn't. That was the one I was supposed to sign up for, and I did. So I did 4 years in seminary, and I got certified as a pastoral counselor, and then I was ordained. And that really opened me up to a lot of other ways to think about things.
Okay.
And I left Hubble. Actually, my doctor, fibromyalgia doctor, prescribed a dark night of the soul. He said, you're taking 4 months off of work, and you're going to do a dark night of the soul. And here's what that means. You're not sitting and watching soap operas. You're journaling. You're doing the physical stuff, the massage and the chiropractic, and here are the supplements, and you're meditating, and you're figuring it out.
No way.
Figuring out your life.
How long ago was that?
Oh, gosh, 95?
Wow.
And so I was in seminary. I was getting all these other trainings. And at the end of that period of time, I decided I can't go back to that job. Okay, I get it. And I remember telling the trainer, the NLP trainer, when I decided, and he said, well, about time you figured it out, because we all do.
Don't you love it when everybody else knows but you?
Yeah, right. How often does that happen? And so I left, and I got ordained, and I started my practice. I also became a Reiki master and added that to the energy healing part of all of this. And, it just was kind of, it all flowed, is how I would say it worked.
So there's never been a conflict between science and spiritual?
No. Interestingly, in college, so now I'm at the small Catholic girls' college, right?
Yeah.
I got assigned a paper to write a one-page paper on infinity. Now, that's a challenge, right? First of all, infinity and one page don't go together. Right. So I started thinking about it, and I would go to the library and I'd read about Boolean algebra, or, well, what if you just go out? If you keep going out forever, is that infinity? No, because you come back and you're here, and I got into this, well, there must be a fourth dimension. Maybe that's time. And then, are there other dimensions? And then what if it's all consciousness? What if we all just drop in from consciousness for a while and then we go back up and we're part of that? So I went to the professor and I said, I don't think I can write a one-page paper.
That's impossible.
This one's not going to work. And fortunately, she said, just go ahead and keep doing your research.
Oh.
I was really blessed. So I went to one of the priests, the only males on campus, and I was fortunate we had two really brilliant, wonderfully heart-centered priests. And I remember talking to this one and saying, so here's what's coming up for me. And I talked about, all of this stuff and consciousness and blah, 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 right? And he was great. Just keep thinking about it. That sounds cool, right? He didn't go into the Bible says or,
right.
Any of that. And so I kind of tucked that away. And about 20 years later, so now I've gone through a marriage and a divorce. I have a daughter, and then remarried, in seminary. And my mom, I started talking to her about some of this new stuff that's coming up. So, fast forward into the 90s. And my mom said, when you were in college, you talked about consciousness and dimensions and stuff. Do you remember? And I was like,
I did. I did talk about that.
Exactly. Thank God my mother was the holder of that for me.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that wonderful?
That is wonderful.
Because, I had been doing, this stuff, the 3D stuff. You do that, right? You establish a career,
yes.
You have a family.
You live in the dream.
Yeah.
You worked on the hub,
Right. Right. And there's my mom saying, no, you talked about that a long time ago. Remember? Consciousness, dimensions, all this other infinity. So it was kind of a fun thing to reconnect to that, to know that had come in and just percolated for a while. And I'm kind of enjoying the fact that thread has been through all of it, because now I'm writing a book on the new consciousness. This is what I've been given as charge.
Okay.
And by the way, I don't have fibromyalgia anymore. So I kind of didn't need that anymore.
Okay, that's gone.
And so this whole idea, I've always felt that I have some role to play in bringing in higher consciousness and helping humanity to evolve. I think that evolution is all about consciousness. I think the people who are anti-evolution are not considering the monkeys, although they may talk about that.
Right.
I think they're more talking about, we don't want you to think your way into an evolutionary consciousness. And so evolutionary consciousness is really kind of where I'm focused. And it seems like the whole progression of my story has led me to be accepting the mantle of moving this forward and pushing this forward.
So it's science and spirituality coming together.
Exactly. And I think it started there in college.
Yeah.
And what we know now is that quantum physics is proving what metaphysics has known for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So the scientific mystic title...
That was going to be the next question. How did that happen?
It happened because of a hand analysis. Scientific hand analysis is not the old gypsy's palmistry, as in fortune telling. Because we now know that all the nerves have endings here. That's why reflexology works on the hand, right? And so, although your fingertips, the fingerprints stay the same, the lines change. And so, you can learn about your life purpose from your hands, and you can learn about what's actually going on with your neurology. I mean, I've read about neurosurgeons who do the scientific hand analysis before they do neurosurgery, because they're looking at what's going on in the brain through the hands. And so I got fascinated by this, and somebody did a reading for me, and she said, you're the scientific mystic, right?
Well, I do now.
And I have been since then. I also, of course, had to go and study scientific hand analysis. How cool is this, right? And so science and spirituality just have been all one. I can't really say that there's this over there and there's that over here, especially quantum physics or out in the cosmos. I mean, I remember as a math major when I learned that Euclidean geometry doesn't work when you get off the tabletop. I mean, I thought that was geometry. But they took us out to the hockey field, and the sum of the angles of a triangle on the hockey field is less than 180 because the curvature of the Earth shows up at the hockey field level.
Huh.
And in order to get to the moon, we had to use yet another geometry because when you get out in space, those trajectories had to be calculated differently.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of like, you can't really, as soon as you do that, you're now in another realm, right?
Absolutely. Oh, wow.
Right? So I think that the whole science and mystical stuff, the science and spirituality stuff is actually the same thing.
Yeah.
And we just, in some way, we've bifurcated, but it doesn't have to be.
Well, I know, I guess in the experiences that I have had, that intuition can't be proven, so therefore it doesn't exist. Which is being proven by science to be incorrect.
Yeah, well, here's how I understand intuition. I mean, you're here to set me off with everything.
Pushing buttons.
Right. I think that when you understand your conscious mind can only handle 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information, right? Because if I say don't think of a pink elephant, you're going to think of one and it's going to bump something else out. You can't think of everything else at once.
Right.
But your unconscious mind is actually absorbing millions of bits of information per second for your whole life and storing it away. I think intuition is the ability to access that and the greater, which is all science. It's all information.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so much more than we can think our way through.
Yeah.
And so if you're tuned in, like have you ever walked into a room where people are smiling, but you know that there's tension?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Well, what's that? That's vibes. That's energy.
Yep.
It's a frequency. And so I think that you have the ability to assess frequencies that are not necessarily what you're thinking about.
Okay.
So your intuition is tuning into other frequencies.
Okay.
And it's accessing that vast database that's been building in you millions of bits per second for your whole life of information being stored.
Wow.
Science.
Science.
It's science!
Do we have questions?
Morgan said, I've always felt science is just another form of religion in a way, in the aspect that no one view has it all correct. It takes the right pieces from everything to form the whole big picture.
Exactly.
Go, Morgan.
And really, wherever anybody is the right place for them because they've taken in just what they can take in.
Right.
And as long as we agree that we can keep growing, we'll take in more information and then we might shift that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I think a lot of people go from religion to religion. Like, it used to be you were born into a religion and you stayed in it your whole life.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And now I think people learn everything they can, and so they go to another space to learn something. Or they drop out of the religious path and they go into I think there's something more, but I'm not sure what it is, so they check the spiritual, not religious box, right? And explore things. So I think that wherever people are is fine. And as long as you're willing to grow, there's another place to look. And so I think that you can make a religion of anything if you put yourself in the box, but it's just another box.
Right.
I don't like boxes.
No, it's time to break out of the box.
Cosmos.
Exactly. Okay, so let's go back to scientific mystic.
Yes.
Are we back on?
Hopefully.
I know.
Yes, you're back on.
We're back.
Yay.
Okay, we apologize for the technical difficulty. Okay.
Too much energy.
Exactly.
Pull it in. Pull it in.
All right, so now I got to get back to what you were saying. All your tools. We talk a lot when we interview all of our different friends because a lot of people have a lot of different tools. Now, interestingly enough, Rosemary did say she is a Reiki master. So that goes right to Jen and I trying to send the message that we think everybody should be at least Reiki 1 attuned.
Absolutely. For a while there, I felt everybody in a hair salon should be Reiki attuned because they're in people's crown chakras.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I'm really careful about who I let in mine. And so I've worked with some salons way back when I was teaching Reiki.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, get everybody in the salon Reiki tuned. And people, what I learned from one salon, I remember the owner calling me like 6 months later and saying, our business is through the roof. People don't know why.
What's going on? Yep.
But, and you know, you have permission to work in their crown chakra because they're sitting in your chair and you're working on their heads.
Right.
But if you are attuned, you know, hands-on Reiki on, right?
Yeah.
Then you're actually beneficially working with them.
Right.
Instead of just doing hair.
Right.
And it also creates a clearer channel for the people who are in people's crown chakras.
Yes.
Like I remember having a massage one time from a fellow back about the time of the invasion of Iraq. And all he did was talk about how we should have used the dirty bombs, we should be doing this, and I'm trying to change the subject. And he was like, we should go in and blah, blah, blah. And you know, all this stuff. And then he said, oh, you know what? I don't have anybody after you. How about if I give you another free half hour? I said, no, thank you very much. I'm leaving.
I don't think so.
Yeah, but see, I think that if you have someone with, you know, who can actually just be a channel of healing energy,
Yes.
then it's going to make a difference. Not only just in the feeling that the person has, but in the business.
You know, the sick side of me just thought of bartenders.
Absolutely.
Bartenders are always having people sit. They're like therapists.
Yeah.
Just
they-
like your
they do.
hairdresser. You know,
Right.
it's the same thing. That's funny. That's where
That's
I go.
a-
We should have tuned all the bartenders.
I know.
Woohoo! That's your father.
Yes.
That's your father, Mr. Drink Dark Beer.
Great.
Yeah.
Good idea.
After her father passed away, I couldn't, or birthed into spirit. I'm a light beer drinker. And then all of a sudden I'm ordering these dark lagers that you can chew. I'm like, what is this? And I was out with Katie eating dinner or something, and she goes, that's Alan. He's been doing the same thing to me. He misses beer.
Yep.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was pretty fun.
And home fries.
And home fries. Okay, so back to your tools. So if someone wants to get a session from you, do you do like individual, I can come for one session, or is it like, girl, you got issues, you need to come for quite a few?
Well, usually I like to have people sign up for 6 sessions
Okay.
because I don't like to leave anybody in what I call the turmoil of transformation.
Here's what's going on. See ya.
Yeah. Now I will do, you know, like a reading or something for someone if they just have, like they just lost their husband and they just want to have a conversation with them kind of to help them over that.
Okay.
And I have had psychologists bring clients who were stuck in their process to
Okay.
have a session with me.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes the therapist is there in the room, but it's that getting over that hump kind of a thing
Right.
that then the talk therapy works better
Okay.
afterwards. So I've done it that way too. But mostly I have a conversation with people to see what it is that they're looking for. Because, you know, quite frankly, sometimes people are looking for a psychic and they want to pay $75 and they want to get told what to do. And it's like, well, I'm not your, yeah.
That's not me.
No.
That's not. That's
I'm
like,
about empowering people.
I have to explain to people that I'm not a medium. I do receive messages from loved ones who have crossed over, but if you're looking for a medium, that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you information that's going to help you move forward. So yeah, that's interesting.
Right, and you know, as I said, I didn't sign up for being a medium.
No.
But that was, you know, I was a math major. I was like, not one of the courses to check.
I
and take. But as part of answering the call, that
Okay.
gift came in.
Now, how could someone get in touch with you to schedule do you do like consultations, a free chat?
I do a discovery session.
A
where
discovery session,
Yeah,
okay.
where we would have a conversation around what they're looking for, what their issues are, and what might be the best way for them to proceed. So
Okay.
whether it's with me or somebody else, or you know, usually I give them free counseling in that because
It happens.
that's just what. Yeah.
You know, it's just,
But and the best way to contact me, actually, The best email for me right now is rosemarybradison@gmail.com. So we'll probably need to spell that or type it in.
Yeah, Jen's going to type it in the comments.
Right. Or people can text me. My cell is 410-991-6139. And both of those will kind of get to me rapidly. The website is thescientificmystic.com.
Okay.
And so there is some information there, but we're in the process of redoing that, so it's kind of old stuff, but it's still connected, and I still am on it. You can read about it.
So the courses that are on there, do you not offer anymore?
Oh, I do. There's not really much on there at this point. I think the Master Heart Mind is still described on there, and Conversations with the Other Side, which I do, like, people invite a handful of their friends over, and I go to their house, and we just, everybody gets a message. And they're a really fun evening, and
I bet they are.
Oh, they are. They're a hoot, and I keep that group really small because everybody gets a message in that format.
Okay, so it's like a private reading.
It's a personal reading in a
group reading
in a group session.
Okay.
So each person gets a private part, but I'm teaching the whole time.
Right.
And so
it's not just like your Uncle Joe says blah 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 blah, and then you move on. No, there's always more teaching, and then and when there's a group that comes together, everybody's supposed to hear everybody else's message. Yep.
So there's a common thread through whoever shows up, and whoever's supposed to show up shows up, and whoever's not supposed to show up doesn't come. So that's kind of a fun thing. And I do individual classes periodically through time, like color therapy, or I've done workshops on abundance, prosperity, and finances, and how those three things are different. And what else have I done? A lot. Well, I do different kinds of workshops as I'm led. So I kind of wait until I get a date and a topic, and then whatever's supposed to come through comes through.
Perfect.
But the Master Heart Mind program, I'm going to start that up again after the spring.
And what is that?
That is a program where we actually go through 7 steps to start with a vision and end up with a roadmap to implement the vision. Because a lot of people start with goals, and if you start with goals, you're setting yourself up to not meet them, right? And then you feel like a failure, and then you just throw your hands up. But if you start with a vision, and then we go through a lot of steps in between that, including getting to the place where we have to clear the blocks, if you have a vision and it brings up stuff, then we have to deal with that.
And the vision always brings up stuff.
It always does.
Always.
And then you can cycle back and revision. And so we go through those steps, and then we move into gratitude because the vision already exists in consciousness. And then the goals fall out of it. The roadmap falls out of it. So when you do it in that process, that's what we do with the Master Heart Mind. So it's a small group that gets together, and we gather and we do that. And so I teach, and there's visualization and worksheets and workbook and stuff in that. But that program's really for somebody who's ready to take a vision and make it happen in 3D.
Be committed. Okay. Now, there was also talk before the show started about you starting up your YouTube show again?
Yes, the Scientific Mystic Show. It's a podcast.
There we go.
Yeah. There's still a couple out there on iTunes from several years ago when I had blonde hair. But yes, so that's again just a message and a meditation kind of a thing. And it's one of those things that it feels like there's so much information coming in that needs to get out. And so, just like you're doing with this show, it's like we've got to get people understanding that it's okay to explore some of this stuff.
Yes.
And not everybody's doing the same thing, but it's not okay to stay locked in a corner with your problems.
No.
Right?
And that's what we said. Everybody's after that same goal of unconditional love. And they need to understand there's a million different ways they can get there.
Well,
and that's why we're doing these shows, because there's somebody out there that's going to resonate with you.
Yeah.
And, you take what resonates and you throw the rest away and move on.
or it'll resonate later.
Exactly.
Some other time.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I teach, and I do like to speak, so give me an audience. I'll talk. But I did a talk at ACT, a Community of Transformation, last year, and I think there are 3 principles of living this conscious life that I think if people really grasp it, they can move forward faster. The first is that all love flows from self-love. And until people get
that is so true.
right? It's like you can't love if you don't love yourself. And once we've got that, we can move on to understanding that everybody's doing the best they can with the resources they have at any given time.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
once you embrace that, you start really being able to live with anybody and deal with whatever's going on.
Yes.
The hardest part of that one is to add the correlate of even me. Right? 'Cause
Exactly.
it's much easier to be non-judgmental
Exactly.
than everyone else. And when you have to learn it about yourself, that's why you do the self-love first.
Right.
But then the third principle is you are the sun in the solar system of your life. You are the sun in the solar system of your life. You have to shine your light. The whole solar system of your life is depending on you, just as our sun is so life-giving to us on earth. You're the sun in the solar system of your life. Shine your light.
Wow. I like that.
So I think when people grasp, and I like to talk about those and go into more detail about them, but when people really get that, you start to understand, well, if I just live by those 3 principles, all I have to do is self-love. Everybody's doing the best they can with the resources they've got at any given moment. I mean, you may wish they had more resources. And 5 minutes later, they might have some feedback. But in that moment, the best they thought they could do is what they chose to do.
Right.
And then if you are the sun in the solar system of your light, and all you have to do, you're the solar system of your life, and you just have to shine your light, and think about it. Those principles really do kind of encompass everything.
Yeah, they do. They really do.
Everything else is noise.
Yeah. Everything else is noise. Yeah. That needs to be on a t-shirt. Everything else is noise.
Along with shift or get off the planet.
Along with shift or get off the planet.
That's my favorite.
Actually, I saw a t-shirt recently on a gal. It said, "Excuse me while I sparkle," and she had sequins on the shirt. Excuse me while I sparkle. I love it.
I love it.
Okay, so on top of all this wonderful stuff you do, you're also an author.
I am. I have, actually, I happen to have a copy of the book. It's called Get Your Woman On.
Ooh.
Embracing Beauty, Grace, and the Power of Women. And this is an anthology that I wrote with several other people, including Sandra Yancey, who is the founder of eWomen Network, for people who know that, and Barbara Niven, who is one of my pals from this group and one of my video trainers. And if you happen to watch Hallmark movies, she's in a lot of the Hallmark movies. And it's just a gathering of stories that are inspirational. They help people see that you can actually go from a problem area to a solution. And so my chapter in here is about leaving the Hubble and having this realization that I'm supposed to do something else. But this is cool, and I'm making a lot of money, and I can go to cocktail parties and brag. But somebody had a different plan for me.
Completely different.
Completely different. And so right now I'm writing a chapter in another anthology for someone else, and I'm writing a book. I'm kind of collecting a lot of the teachings I've already brought in, and I'm getting new material all the time. The Book of the New Consciousness. And it's really like a Bible for this evolutionary consciousness. And I can foresee study groups using it to explore consciousness and how we raise our consciousness and what does it mean to look in a different way to multidimensional living.
We were talking about that a little bit before the show, about how we feel this calling is all about raising the vibration.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I think that there's a level of understanding that multidimensional living is what we're doing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And when we become conscious of it, we can create consciously.
Mm-hmm.
And we can co-create consciously. And we can understand it's not putative to say that you're responsible. Your thoughts are creating your realities, and why did you create all that junk in your life, right? That doesn't work. But the idea that we're already manifesting, we're already living in all these dimensions. I mean, people who don't know anything about new consciousness or dimensions will talk about, oh, you know what, I saw my grandfather down the hall, and he died, but he was wearing that thing. I'll just tell you a brief story about that. In my family, my dad passed away in '83, and all the cousins were young. When they were in their 20s, one of them said something about, when Granddad died, I used to see him. He'd come in and say goodnight to me. And, we were going, really? And then another cousin said, oh, yeah, he used to come to see me, too. And then another one said, yeah, remember he was wearing that golf sweater thing? And, we adults are sitting around like, oh, how come you didn't tell us?
Exactly.
Right? And they said, we thought that's what
didn't everybody say
parents did. After that's what dying was. They just came and said goodnight and left. And it's like there's an acceptance at a certain level that that's just how things are.
Right.
And then we kind of forget. Right? And I think that people have seen angels, people hear voices, and I just think that that's a part of this multidimensional thing. Mm-hmm. That if we label it multidimensional, that's fine. If we don't want to label it, or we call it accessing heaven or whatever, but I think we're already in all the dimensions all the time.
I agree. It's bringing it to your consciousness. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's been interesting to me doing this work to find out how many people are divinely connected and don't realize that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is surprising to me. And when you tell them and try to get them to realize it, they're like, no, because they don't think they're worthy of a divine connection when everyone has it.
All love flows from self-love.
Exactly.
Right. I had a friend who had Meniere's disease for 7 years, and the medical community was treating her for it, and she finally realized it was this voice trying to come in through her, an entity named Rose that she was supposed to channel. And when she finally agreed to drop the facade and say, okay, I will start giving messages, Meniere's disease went away.
Oh, wow.
Just like I don't have fibromyalgia now. And I've had doctors say, oh, you must have been misdiagnosed. No, those books on your shelf, that doctor was my doctor. He now travels around the world as the expert teaching on fibromyalgia. So he didn't misdiagnose me.
Right. Right.
Nor did the orthopedic, nor did the rheumatologist. It's right. Right. I don't have it anymore because I don't need it anymore.
Exactly.
What a concept.
And you believe that you don't need it anymore.
Because I'm really into getting the messages and hearing them before the 2x4 to the side of the head. It's like, can I get them with ease and grace?
Please, ask for ease and grace.
Ease and grace.
I don't need to learn them under fire anymore.
Right, exactly. And so I don't need that kind of thing anymore. I'm listening. I am listening.
Perfect. Okay, before we end, just one more time, could you give them your 3 principles? Because I always ask for pearls of wisdom, and that's perfect.
All love flows from self-love. Everybody's doing the best they can with the resources they have at any given moment. You are the sun in the solar system of your life. Just be the light.
Awesome. Whew. All right. So remember, if you'd like to get in touch with Rosemary, she's given her phone number. Jen, were you able to put that up?
No, give me the phone number again.
I was going to say.
410-991-6139.
Okay, excellent. And the website is www. Okay.
TheScientificMystic.com.
And the information is a little old, but it can give you a good idea of...
I'm still me.
Yep, exactly. And, yeah. Thank you very much. This has been great.
This has been fun.
Yeah, this has been awesome. All right. Well, we're going to say goodnight. Thank you all for joining us. And don't forget...
Both times.
We're going to say goodnight again.
Yes.
We rudely did not say goodnight before.
Thank you for joining us 2 times.
Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for joining us 2 times. And don't forget, you guys are awesome.
Mwah.